A boy goes to watch the wedding of Prince Charles and Princess Diana to never be seen again. Could this child have fallen victim to a pedophile ring whose members literally ruled the world? And could this be connected to another abduction case? Let's discuss. Welcome to Peculiar Occurrences. I'm your host, Lilith Nova. If you watched my episode about Martin Allen, a 15-year-old boy who went missing and may have fallen victim to a very famous pedophile ring, you may remember me mentioning another boy. A boy from India named Vishal Mehrotra. If you have not seen that episode, I suggest going and watching it before you watch this one. Today I want to discuss the disappearance of Vishal Mehrotra, along with the famous pedophile ring that connected these two cases. Vishal was a 8-year-old little boy who was born in India, and his family came to the UK in 1978. Vishal's father, Vishnabar, was a solicitor at the time of his disappearance in the UK. A solicitor in British terms is a legal professional that has the ability to draw up wills or other legal documents. And he is now a retired magistrate. Vishal's mother, Aruba Mehrotra, was estranged from her family at the time and still lived in India. The family lived on Holmbush Road in Punity in South London. Vishal was known to be bright and independent. He traveled to his school in Queensgate every day all on his own. Okay, now we're going to jump to a historical day in history. Wednesday, July 29th, 1981. The day that Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer were married. The wedding itself was attended by 3,500 of the most rich and powerful people around the world, including every crowned head in Europe. And the wedding itself cost more than $70 million. And an estimated 750 million people watched the event on television. And one of the young and enthusiastic people who went to see this event was young 8-year-old Vishal. And after watching the festivities, the young boy was walking home with his nanny and sister through Punity in London. And according to the two, Vishal was walking at least 100 yards in front of them. And soon Vishal crossed the road. Near Carlton Drive, he rounded a corner and he was gone. When the two had finally caught up, Vishal had disappeared. This was near the tube station, so at first the nanny and the sister thought that Vishal had decided to get on the train and head on home, since he often went through town all on his own. Yet, he was never seen again. Another young boy who disappeared near a train transit just like Martin Allen. And of course, an investigation was launched, and a search was conducted, but nothing was ever found. It was like the boy had vanished into thin air. Initial investigations included searching the place of disappearance from the air with thermal cameras, along with a thorough search of the grounds and the rivers. And at first it was thought that Vishal might have tried to travel back to India to be with his mother, so there was an investigation launched by the international police. The police investigated hundreds of sightings and ended up interviewing over 14,000 people. On February 25th, 1982, two men that were shooting pigeons discovered a skull, 7 rib bones, and a section of vertebrae at a farm near Chester. The bones seemed to have been disturbed by foxes and was buried in a shallow hole that was only about 2 feet. Following the discovery, a large-scale investigation was launched, involving about 30 police officers, where more bones were found, although no clothing was ever found. The bones were taken to London for a forensic investigation. Initially, the police believed that the bones had been buried around July 29, 1981. Now, let's talk about what might have happened to Vishal. At the time, the police seemed to want to implicate a notorious child murderer named Cindy Cook. Cindy Cook was also someone I talked about in the Martin Allen case. And as well, Cindy had connections with the chauffeur service that Martin Allen's father worked for, and was also a member of the Dirty Dozen, a group of organized pedophiles who had systematically kidnapped and raped children in the 1970s and the 1980s. And during the time that Vishal had disappeared, Cindy Cook was working at a traveling fair company and ran a game called Test Your Strength in order to lure in young boys. From there, he would drug the boys and take them to an apartment that the group had rented. There, they would rape and abuse the victims. And according to police reports, it was suspected that the group had murdered up to 20 children. There's no real evidence that Vishal was ever connected to this group, but it was brought up as a possibility in later investigations. In 2014, Vishal's father had came forward and said that he had received a mysterious phone call shortly after the disappearance. The caller was supposed to be a man in his 20s that claimed that Vishal had been kidnapped by some very powerful and rich people. Some very high-profile people who were also pedophiles, who frequented the Elm guest house. Vishal's father had recorded the phone call and even gave this recording to the police, but the police had thought that it was probably a prank call. Though Vishal's father had expected this, since the man on the phone told him he had already tried to go to the police and was accused of being a prank. So what's the Elm Guest House? Well, guest house in British terms stands for a bed and breakfast. Okay, so here's what we know about the Elm Guest House. It's located in Hammersmith, less than a mile from where Vishal had disappeared, and around 3 miles away from where Martin Allen had disappeared. The house was ran by a woman named Carol Kastner, along with her husband, and it was widely reported that the Elm Guest House was a gay brothel. It was advertised in a homosexual publication that this was a place for gay men to come and meet each other in safety and comfort. The house was raided by police and shut down in June of 1982, a couple months after Vishal's body had been found. Carol and her husband were both arrested, and it was alleged that Carol was held for 3 days without being charged. The couple was given suspended sentences for running a disorderly house and having obscene videos, which turned out to be videos of child pornography. There were at least 12 underage boys that gave evidence to the police that they had been abused. There was also reports that children's clothing had been found in the Elm Guest House, and there weren't any further charges at that time, and as far as I can tell, any further investigations. The next thing we know for sure is that Carol Kastner died in 1990. She was a diabetic, but found in her apartment next to several vials of insulin. A man named Chris Fay, a former social worker, claimed that yes, while this place was in fact a gay brothel, that was also an illegal cover. Like, the bed and breakfast itself was a cover for the gay brothel, while the gay brothel was actually a cover for a group of elite pedophiles that would often use this place to host their parties. Chris Fay met Carol Kastner in 1989, and said that at that time that Carol showed him a guest list full of VIPs that were very high ranking and very powerful people. And Faye even wrote down many names on that list. Faye also claims that Carol showed him some very incriminating photos of MPs and cabinet ministers in very compromising positions with children. At this point in her life, Carol had been on a downward spiral for years. She had been drinking heavily and had been separated from her husband, and it was thought that she was also suicidal. And when Carol died, Chris Faye showed up at her inquisition, which is something that happens for anybody that dies under mysterious circumstances in England. At the inquisition, Faye testified to the existence of Carol's list. Then in the 1980s, there was a member of parliament named Geoffrey Dickens, or O. Dickie, who actively campaigned against a powerful circle of elite pedophiles. In 1984, Dickinson's gave a collection of documents on alleged pedophiles from within the British government to the Home Secretary Leon Britton. Britton then claimed that he handed the 40-page document to the police, but the police claimed they never received any such document. It was later discovered that during his stint as Home Secretary, Leon Brent lost 114 documents associated with pedophile rings and child abuse. Documents that would have implicated members of Parliament. In 2014, the Metropolitan Police of London launched several investigations into alleged pedophile rings within Parliament. These investigations were sparked by the testimony of a victim known only as Nick, a person we talked about in the Martin Allen case. Nick had given 12 names of people he had been allegedly abused by in the 80s, including multiple members of Parliament, along with the name of Leon Britton and former Prime Minister Edward Heath. Nick also claimed that the group was organized and transported people around and was responsible for at least 3 murders. A huge media campaign was launched, and then the police came out and said these claims were credible and true before the investigation had ever even been conducted. It was eventually come to the conclusion that there was not enough evidence to implicate anyone who had been named, and Nick was seen as a fantasizer. Well, ultimately, to this day, no answers to what happened to Vishna has ever been found. Though I myself have seen many connections between his case and that of Martin Allen's. From both boys disappearing near a railway transit to both boys often going around town by themselves where they could have been stalked and their routine could have been memorized by predators. As well with both boys having disappeared just miles away from the Elm Guest House, and the connection to Sidney Cook and the Dirty Dozen in both boys' cases. So what do you think about this peculiar occurrence? What could have happened to Vishal and Martin? And were these two cases actually connected? Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to check out the description box for your peculiar occurrence gear. We got some really great stuff. And don't forget to hit that like button, share this out to all your peculiar friends, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that bell, or it's like you didn't even subscribe and YouTube won't even tell you when I upload. And until next time, keep your eyes peeled for all things peculiar. Do 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 do. Yeah.
Are you listening? Damn.